Oh no, they found us out. Those maniacs! How could they have deciphered all those clues? Yep, this is another creationist trying to prove somehow that atheism is somehow wrong and that evolution isn't real, etc., etc. Let's proceed with the train wreck.
What is atheism? Atheism is rejecting belief in any form of unseen divinity. The atheist denies the existence of a creator, of divine revelation, and of resurrection.
So, off the bat, the creator of this video gets the definition of the word atheism or atheist wrong. Using the word deny implies the creator is proven, and so well that the atheist is somehow willfully denying it. Atheists don't deny the existence of a creator. They simply don't believe in one. A baby is an atheist because until you teach them what a deity is, they have no concept of one, and thus do not believe in one. They lack any belief in a god. Atheism is, in actuality, the default position all human beings start with. As for divine revelation, you'd need to demonstrate a god before you can demonstrate they revealed anything. And resurrection? You don't need to be an atheist to not believe in resurrection. All it takes is not belonging to a specific religion that teaches resurrection.
What is the proof that there is a creator? There are many proofs, but we will focus on two.
Oh, this will be good.
The first is called proof on the basis of existence, and the second is called proof on the basis of providence. What is meant by proof on the basis of existence? Everything is temporarily originated. It came into existence after it was non-existent, so it must have had an originator.
No, existence doesn't prove a creator. What you just did was use essentially the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God. Kalam basically goes like this. Premise 1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2. The universe began to exist. Conclusion. Therefore, the universe has a cause. It's fairly simple and straightforward and seems very logical. Premise 1 most will simply grant because everything we know of is based on cause and effect. Premise 2 is the real sticking point. Did the universe ever begin to exist? We don't know. It's quite possible that the universe always existed. After all, nothing as we humans have ever witnessed has ever began to exist. Matter and energy have never been created, only changed from one form to another. What little creation humans claim to have experienced is mostly us trying to interpret these changes in a way that makes sense to us. This is made evident by the conclusion. Anyone willing to grant premise 2, and I don't, would then likely agree the universe had a cause. But since the universe didn't exist before it was caused to exist, something else existed to cause it. That thing began to exist, so it had a cause, and so on and so forth. It's an infinite regress. And even if you can get to there being a cause, there is nothing to then suppose that cause is not only a deity, but the deity you picked. So this entire argument for creation is pure horseshit. Now this person tries to claim how many molecules exist in the universe, and tries to claim they're all proofs of God, and that they are almost countless proofs in and of themselves. But this is just nonsense made to make the viewer go, gee, that's a lot.
That is why many verses of the Quran bring the creations into focus. Allah says, "Say, look at whatever exists in heaven and on earth. But signs and warnings do not benefit the unbelievers." Translation of the meaning of the Quran, chapter 10, verse 101.
And right now, some of you out there are doing a double take going, Quran? Yep, this is an Islamic creationist. This video is from Merciful Servant, a YouTube channel devoted to English language teachings of the Quran and the Islamic faith. Sounds pretty much like any Christian video you've seen, doesn't it? Well, your first clue would have been this. As for the verse itself, you need to demonstrate why the Quran is relevant before you can use verses to prove anything. I mean, the Greeks thought that the earth was made by Nyx, a giant black bird, laying a golden egg, which hatched into two halves, the upper forming the sky and the lower forming the earth. Should I listen to the Quran or the ancient Greeks? I mean, both are from ancient books with no evidence to support their wacky nonsense, so one is about as good as the other.
So everything that has originated is in itself a direct proof that there is an originator. What is meant by proof on the basis of providence? It means that everything ultimately in existence started from the quarks, which are the smallest subatomic particles ever allocated up to the galaxies, carries an extent of functional complexity.
So we go from a reworded version of the Kalam cosmological argument to the argument from complexity. This is another debunked creationist argument, but I will let him state his so-called proof before debunking it.
This means that each has a specific and specialized function, and a functional complexity necessarily means a grade above mere existence. Existence is a status, and the complexity within the originated thing is a grade above that status of mere existence. So, everything around you is designed in a special method so as to carry on a special function. Hence, everything around you carries a functional complexity, and this complexity is a proof of origination, which means that it must have had an originator. An example of this is the lamp. This is a functional complexity. The electric lamp is made up of a coil.
Okay, fast forwarding because we don't need to know how a light bulb works.
Here, the electric lamp demonstrates a system of complexity that cannot be dismissed or simplified, since it carries a rudimentary, rational indication to the mastery of the manufacturer. Then, the one who denies the masterful formation of the lamp or assumes that it originated by chance is the one required to fetch a proof to his assumption. The lamp maker knows pretty much well what electricity means, how it is conveyed, the benefit of the lamp, and the sensitivity of the coil. That's why the presence of the lamp is in itself a proof on the mastery of the maker, while having a diverse array of lamps can never be a proof that it is all just mere chance. Using this same rationalization, we can deduct that a creature with all this functional complexity, the human being, must have had an originator.
The more astute atheist watching this will recognize the watchmaker argument right off. The watchmaker argument was made famous by William Paley in 1802 when he made an argument for the existence of God. To paraphrase his old-timey English, imagine if you walked along and found a rock. Upon finding this rock and wondering how it got there, you might think, well, it must always have been there, and this wouldn't be absurd or hard to believe. But if you walk further and found a watch, it would be absurd to think so. The watch is complicated. It's manufactured. It's clearly designed, which means it had a designer. This is essentially what the author of this video is doing. Light bulbs are complex. They can't happen by chance, so they had a designer. Atoms are complex, and similarly they also can't happen by chance, so they must have a designer. But we don't recognize design by complexity. We recognize design by contrasting it with what happens naturally. Here's an example. Is this rock complex? Is it intricately designed? Most people would go no, it's definitely not when looking at it. But you'd be wrong. Yep, that's a fake rock. It's made of styrofoam and such and made to look like a real rock. Someone took the time and effort to actually sit and make a replica rock that's lighter than a real one. What about this? Is this complex? Well, it is created. We know a light bulb is designed because all the evidence we have shows light bulbs are designed. We know a rock happens in nature because the vast majority of rocks we know are formed naturally. People can create simple things that aren't complex, things that are vastly less complex than a plant or an animal. So complexity is not how we recognize design. Complexity is just evidence of complexity. We recognize design by its contrast to what happens naturally. To understand something is hot, you need to know what is cold. You need something to contrast it to. If you assume everything is designed, you never recognize design. You're only assuming it. Now, the video goes on, much like the last so-called proof, stating how we're made of a lot more parts than a lamp, claiming DNA is spelled out in letters. It's not. And claiming our DNA is located in the nucleus of each of our molecules, which is wrong. It's in the nucleus of our cells. They continually show they don't understand the subjects they're talking about or the words they use. And it gets worse, because a day later, they put out a video trying to disprove evolution itself. And they try to do it in just over 2.5 minutes.
Why couldn't the human beings and other living organisms have all originated from other simple primates? There are two illogicalities here. First, there is not one single evidence proving a major evolutionary development. By evolutionary development, we mean the transition of one species into another form of species.
And here the video gets one thing right. There isn't any evidence of one species turning into another. And do you know why? Because if such a thing happened, it would disprove evolution, because that's not what the theory of evolution claims. They show monkeys or apes side by side with humans and seem to expect something like a half-man, half-ape, or possibly even something like a crocoduck, a half-duck, half-crocodile animal.
Nothing becoming something, blowing up and becoming an organized everything, just doesn't fit logic to me. Plus, Darwin said in order to prove evolution, which is the #1 alternative to God, you've got to be able to prove transitional forms, one animal transitioning into another. And all through the fossil record and life, we don't find one of these. A crocoduck.
The problem isn't evolutionary theory. The problem is you don't understand it.
Scientists have never been able to verify or spot a single evidence on a transition from species to another, and all of these are just mere speculations.
Actually, there's a lot of evidence for evolution, and not just with transitional fossils, which we actually have a ton of. DNA evidence is another strong one, where we can examine the DNA of various related species and find out how their DNA diverged from each other. We see evolution today in the human species, like those who evolved to be immune to HIV. There are also people now who can see a greater range of colors than normal human vision. These are evolutionary mutations, but for a more practical one, look at dogs. Dogs are an evolution of wolves. The major difference is instead of them evolving due to natural selection, they evolve via artificial selection by humans. The mechanism is the same, it's the selection process that differs. But the evidence doesn't matter to the maker of this video, as evidenced here.
So, how can an atheist choose to believe in a speculative evidence and deny our religion-based solid evidence?
What solid evidence? What little evidence you claim to have is atheists are wrong. You haven't presented evidence, you've just claimed, without any real backing, that what evidence we do have is somehow wrong. I mean, most of this video is literally just claiming what we know about science is wrong, purely because of something you read in Nature magazine. And then you go on to say, well, if science isn't the answer, therefore God, and start quoting verses from the Quran. You have no evidence, no proof. What you have is ignorance of the subject matter you are trying to teach to others as if it were facts. The only thing you've proven is Islamic creationists are just as clueless as Christian ones.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare.
Anyways, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this video, remember to mash that like and subscribe button. If you enjoy this content or have requests for future videos, leave a comment or send me a message. If you want to be kept up to date on when I post videos, feel free to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And as always, I will see you next time.